Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallava Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajaka Sutta Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Gaur Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are finishing this chapter today, chapter 69. Narada's visits Krishna's palaces. So the last two verses of this chapter. And the way they broke up the Bhagavatam last two verses in this book. Continues in the next book. Okay, so text 44. I can see it. Evam manuṣya-padavīm anuvartamāno nārāyaṇo khila-bhavāya gṛhīta-śaktiḥ reme. Why is it so hard for me to see today? Getting old. Reme ṣoḍaśa-sahasra-varāṅganānāṁ sa-vrīḍa-sauhṛda-nirīkṣaṇa-hāsa-juṣṭaḥ sa-vrīḍa-sauhṛda-nirīkṣaṇa-hāsa-juṣṭaḥ. Please chant.
evam manuṣya-padavīm anuvartamāno
anuvartamāno
nārāyaṇo khila-bhavāya gṛhīta-śaktiḥ
nārāyaṇo khila-bhavāya gṛhīta-śaktiḥ
reme ṣoḍaśa-sahasra-varāṅganānāṁ
sa-vrīḍa-sauhṛda-nirīkṣaṇa-hāsa-juṣṭaḥ.
evam manuṣya-padavīm anuvartamāno
nārāyaṇo khila-bhavāya gṛhīta-śaktiḥ sa-vrīḍa-sauhṛda-nirīkṣaṇa. Ladies? evam manuṣya-padavīm anuvartamāno So, it's easier to read a computer somehow. Evam means thus. Manuṣya, we know, means the human beings. Padavīm, the path. Anuvartamānaḥ, following. We know that, right? Anu means to follow. Right? We know what the next word is. Nārāyaṇa, the Supreme Lord Nārayaṇa. Akhila, of everyone. Bhavāya means for their welfare. Gṛhīta means having manifest. Shakti, famous word, his potencies. Reme, he enjoyed. Aṅga, so in this case it's referring to King Parīkṣit. ṣoḍaśa means 16, and sahasra, right, like Vishnu Sahasranam, 1,000. Vara means most excellent. Aṅganānām is of women. Sa-vrīḍa is shy. Ṣoḍaśa and affectionate. Like in the, what's that, the first verse of the 7th canto? ṣoḍaśa-sahasra-varāṅganānāṁ, right? The relationship between guru and disciple, isn't that there? Okay. Nirīkṣaṇa, of the glances. Hasa and laughter, and juṣṭa means satisfied. So the translation. In this way, Lord Nārāyaṇa imitated the ways of ordinary humans, manifesting his divine potencies for the benefits of all beings. Thus he enjoyed, dear king, in the company of his 16,000 exalted consorts, who served the Lord with their shy, affectionate glances and laughter. So the next verse, the last verse, kind of a shruti fal for this pastime, kind of the benediction that you get by hearing shruti. Shruti, to hear, fal means fruit. Lord Hari is the ultimate cause of universal creation, maintenance, and destruction. My dear king, anyone who chants about, hears about, or simply appreciates the extraordinary activities he performed in this world, which are impossible to imitate, will surely develop devotion for the Supreme Lord the bestower of liberation. And the purport, there's two parts to this purport, so there'll be two parts to this class. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti has given various meanings for the word anaya vishayani. This term may indicate that the Lord performed activities in Dwarka that were unusual even for his plenary expansions, to say nothing of others. Or the term can be understood to indicate that the Lord performed these activities for the sake of his pure, exclusive devotees. In any case, one who recites or hears accounts of these pastimes will certainly be engaged in Krishna consciousness, and, as Srila Prabhupada writes, so now they're quoting Prabhupada's Krishna book, chapter 69, quote, certainly find it very easy to traverse the path of liberation and taste the nectar of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Srila Prabhupada further points out that the word anumodate here indicates that one who supports a preacher of the Krishna conscious movement will also receive the benefits mentioned here. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th canto, 69th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Narada Muni Visits Lord Krishna's Palaces in Dwarka. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When I first was reading the Bhagavad Gita, like 1975, and I read the first chapter, and I almost closed the book and forgot about Krishna consciousness, just by reading verses 28 and 29 of the Gita. Because I said, the author, I didn't know much about Prabhupada at the time, the author is contradicting himself. What is this? Prabhupada writes in the purport of 28, this is chapter 1. Although it is not mentioned here, still one can easily imagine that not only were Arjuna's bodily limbs quivering and his mouth drying up, but he was also crying out of compassion. Such symptoms in Arjuna were not due to weakness, but to his soft-heartedness, a characteristic of a pure devotee of the Lord. And then Prabhupada quotes the verse, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati atkinchana. So I said, great, that sounds great, pure devotee, compassion. But then I read the purport to 29. There are two kinds of trembling of the body and two kinds of standing of the hair on end. Such phenomena occur either in great spiritual ecstasy or out of great fear under material conditions. There is no fear in transcendental realization. Arjuna's symptoms in this situation are out of material fear, namely loss of life. All these are due to a material conception of life. So I was like, how could the author contradict like one verse after another? At least wait 10 verses or something. But in 28 he says he's a pure, soft-hearted devotee, and in 29 he says he's in the material conception of life. And when I read this purport here, it's different. It's different, of course. But Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is giving two different interpretations to the same verse. So we can look at things different. I was so lucky. It was early, sort of, in ISKCON, but there was one very intelligent devotee, and I asked him, and he explained. And he told me, well, why can't both be right? Why can't, on one hand, Arjuna's doing this to set an example of someone who's entrapped in Maya, and on the other hand, he's also a great devotee. And I was 16 or 17. I just said, okay, Prabhu. I mean, when you're that young, you just kind of Yes. But it's true. And here this purport is showing that. There's a great indication of this in the 22nd chapter of the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Uddhava says, so I'm reading a little bit, but please, I know sometimes you read, sometimes people do, right? But it's just a translation, so it's not too bad. Uddhava asks Krishna, "My dear Lord, Master of the universe, how many different elements of creation have been enumerated by the great sages? I have heard from you personally, describe a total of 28. And then he lists them. I can read them. God, the jiva, mahatattva, false ego, the 5 gross elements, the 10 senses, the mind, the 5 subtle objects, the 3 modes of material nature. But some authorities say that there are 26 elements. So Krishna says 28. Somebody says 26. While others say 25. Or else 7, 9, 6, 4, or 11. And even others say there are 16, 17, or 13. What did each of these sages have in mind when he calculated the creative elements in such different ways? O Supreme Eternal, kindly explain this to me." So he was saying, what is it? Tarko pratishta shuteya bibinam nashabishir yashyam natam. You're not a rishi unless you have a different opinion than another rishi, right? So Krishna says in the next verse, "Because all material elements are present everywhere, it is reasonable that different learned brahmanas have analyzed them in different ways." So Krishna says it's reasonable. "All such philosophers spoke under the shelter of my mystic potency, and thus they could say anything without contradicting the truth." So when I read that, I was like, wow. And I know this is a little like, that we're talking about, my service is helping devotees deal with conflicts in our society. So I kind of, like if you're trying to buy a new watch, all of a sudden you notice everybody's watch. Or buying a new car, you notice everyone's car. Or I guess even if you're buying a new mridanga, you notice all the mridangas in the temple room, right? So when I read purports, I just see like conflict resolution. So when I read this, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying 2 different things, I thought, okay, let me talk at least in the first part of class about that. So Prabhupada helps us reconcile this in the 6th chapter, the very beginning of the 6th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. And he says, "The purport of this statement is Srila Rupa Goswami proposes to mention only basic principles, not details." Okay, important point, important distinction. For example, a basic principle is that one has to accept the spiritual master, Bas, right? Exactly how one follows the instructions of his spiritual master may be considered a detail. Prabhupada would say, book distribution is the most important service. Then he would say the pujari is the most fortunate person in the universe. And Gurukul is so, like that. For example, if one is following the instructions of his spiritual master, and that instruction is different from the instructions of another spiritual master, that is called detailed information. But the basic principle of accepting a spiritual master is good everywhere, although the details may be different. So this is so important for us just in practical practices of Krishna consciousness and understanding principles and understanding what we can adjust according to time, place, and circumstance. So I don't see him here right now, but our Shruti-Kirti Prabhu asked Prabhupada this question right here. Not right here, but right over there in Prabhupada's room. Shruti-Kirti, as he moved to massage Prabhupada's side, asked, "Prabhupada, how can we tell the difference between making an adjustment and changing a principle?" Anyone know the answer? Yes. Prabhupada's eyes closed, and Shruti-Kirti continued to massage. After a few moments, Prabhupada opened his eyes and said, "That takes a little intelligence." That takes a little intelligence. So often we see in our society sometimes that we fight over details, but we're fighting often because we think they're principles, right? And you see, I don't use social media, but I'm sure it's just filled with devotees going, because I also do conflict resolution for other churches and synagogues, other religions. And they have the same thing that ISKCON. They go through the exact same. They have, matter of fact, I was doing something with the Anglican Church, the other week, and the person told me, "We are Christians. We don't fight. We fight dirty." We really get into it. So I said, okay, we could have a competition between your church and ISKCON. But there can be more than one way of seeing something, and they can all be right, as we learned from the 11th canto. Here's another example. I believe this was also here right in Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada was sitting in Vrindavan in September 1976. Two of his sannyasi disciples came before him. Prabhupada spoke to them individually, giving different instructions, so they weren't in the room at the same time. To one he said, "You are a sannyasi. Why are you spending such a long time here? You have a bus, you must travel. Sannyas means that now you have to preach all over the world. So why you should be thinking to becoming temple president here? Actually, a sannyasi should not stay in any place for more than 3 days at a time. When the wheels stop turning, then preaching is stopped also. Still, the temple is nirguna, so you may stay, but not for more than 3 days. That is allowed, but only if you have some business there." As soon as he had finished speaking that way, Prabhupada turned to the other sannyasi and told him, "Now you must never leave Vrindavan unless I say so. You should stay here and do the management." All the devotees present laughed. It seemed wonderful how Prabhupada had just given two completely contradictory statements, and yet everyone accepted them as truth. So time, place, and circumstance, and also the different nature of the individual. I remember one time Rameshwar Prabhu, well at that time Rameshwar Maharaj, if you read the conversations sometimes, some devotees, and Rameshwar Prabhu was one of them, really tried to get Prabhupada to say something. Ask a question in a way, So he was trying to get Prabhupada, a devotee who was running a farm, was trying to get Prabhupada to say that he should still go out on book distribution sometimes. He was kind of pushing Prabhupada like that. And Prabhupada said, "Do you think the spiritual master is a dull stone, that he cannot give one disciple instruction for his benefit and another disciple a different instruction for his benefit?" Right? So, So Prabhupada writes about this, that disunity between individual souls is so strong within this material world that even in a society, this is in a purport, even in a society of Krishna consciousness, members sometimes appear disunited due to having different opinions and leaning towards material things. Actually, in Krishna consciousness, there cannot be two opinions. There is only one goal. So even though there may be, because there's one goal or there's one principle, right, that we should all agree on. What is that? To serve Krishna to one's best ability. To serve Krishna to one's best ability. If there is some disagreement over service, now this is a real challenge for us, but listen to this. Can you imagine what our movement would be like if we just fully embraced this sentence? If there is some disagreement over service, such disagreement is to be taken as spiritual. Those who are actually engaged in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be disunited in any circumstance. So this is Prabhupada's challenge to us, because it's Kali Yuga. We can fight over anything. It's, people say to me do you keep yourself busy just dealing with conflicts? And I just say, Prabhu, it's Kali Yuga. My service is a growth industry. It's not going away. And then Prabhupada writes a famous letter, material nature means dissension and disagreement, especially in this Kali Yuga. So he's especially in Kali Yuga. Dissension and disagreement. But for this Krishna consciousness movement, its success will depend on agreement even though there are varieties of engagement. Right? So and even if there's variety of opinions, our success will depend on agreeing. In the material world, there are varieties, but there is no agreement. In the spiritual world, there is varieties, but there is agreement. That is the difference. The materialists, without being able to adjust the varieties and the disagreements, make everything, as Prabhupada would say, jiro. They cannot come to agreement with varieties, but if we keep Krishna in the center, then there will be agreement in varieties. That is called, anyone know the term that Prabhupada used for this? Unity in diversity. And now listen to this. He says, therefore, I am therefore suggesting that all our men meet in Mayapur every year during the birth anniversary of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. With all GBC and senior men present, we should discuss how to make unity in diversity. So he said, leaders should come every year. This is what they should discuss. But if we fight on account of diversity, listen to this, it is simply the material platform. Please try to maintain the philosophy of unity in diversity. That will make our movement successful. So this is a challenge in Kali Yuga, but I hope, it's not even Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur saying something different than Baladev Vidyabhusa. He's saying something different about himself. He's saying it could be interpreted this way, it could be interpreted that way. And Uddhava's question in the 11th canto, well, all these sages say different things. Krishna said, no, it's okay. Now that doesn't mean there isn't anything that's bogus. It just means that there's boundaries, and the boundaries aren't this big, the boundaries are about this big. There are, obviously, there's things that are not, not just unity and diversity. What did Jayadvaita Maharaj call it? Unity in perversity. So there are things that are outside of what's okay. But within that, we should give each other a break. Kali Yuga, we have such important service, we have just the challenge itself, as we're going to hear in the second half of this class. When does class go till? Oh, it's not easy to become Krishna conscious, not easy to, satatam kirti, what's that word? To always think of Krishna and never forget him. Yes, smartatam, what is it? Smartavya satatam Vishnu. I always remember, if you're smart, you'll always remember Vishnu. That's how I used to remember that verse. Smartavya. Smart. Anyway, I wasn't very good at verse memorization, so I had to kind of think of a trick. We see that I think we all know, just like Prabhupada gives the example of Kamsa, right? That he was so Krishna conscious. He was always thinking of Krishna. Shishupal also, right? It wasn't Anukul, but they were always thinking of Krishna. And I think if you think about it, if you've ever in your life, either before a devotee or hopefully not as a devotee, if there's someone that really was like an enemy or just giving you a super hard time, I think it's likely you were thinking of that person more intensely than you were thinking of your spiritual master or Krishna or some nice devotee, something like that, right? It can sometimes become almost an obsession. Right, so we have to be careful because we're supposed to be remembering Krishna and Anukul favorably, and that is a challenge. That is a challenge to come to that level of smartavya satatam Vishnu vismartavya najati, never forgetting Krishna. It's hard. It's hard work, but it's also, of course, even more importantly, it's so weird looking this way and seeing yourself on the video. On the screen. I know, I'm trying not to look up there. Always remember Krishna. It takes a lot of, Krishna's mercy, right? And what is like a surefire way to not get Krishna's mercy? If you could think of the best way to displease Krishna, what would it be? Yeah, I don't know. I can't even see past my hand because I have my glasses on. But yes, offend devotees, right? And so we get so caught up in it sometimes, and it's just such a distraction. That's why I like hanging out with Panchagoda Prabhu. He's always positive. He's always looking at the positive in people.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Sometimes managers also have to, find fault in order to help devotees and improve the service. But yes. So this is the first thing I wanted to say. I could take a few questions now before I go on to the second part of the purport. But any comments or questions based on what we've covered so far? I see a hand. Yes, Prabhu. I think it's a Prabhu. Yes. You're at like almost the tatasta between Mataji's and Prabhu's. Like, yeah.
So the difficulty is when we are not advanced enough, then we are not able to adjust this principle of unity and diversity, and we need help of more advanced devotees.
Yeah. We can discuss things nicely. Let me. Here's a quote from the Bhagavad Gita. It's a good book. Chapter 10, verse 32. And Krishna says that I am Vada, V-A-D-A. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Just give me a second to find it. Here we go. Merely, in the purport, Prabhupada writes, merely trying to defeat one's opponent is called vitanda. Have you ever seen that on social media or whatever? Yeah, I'm just trying to defeat the other person. But the actual conclusion is called vada. This conclusive truth is a representation of Krishna. And Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu translated some of the commentary to this. I don't remember if it's Baladeva Vibhusan or Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, but Gopi Pranadhana Prabhu says, he translates, Nyaya, logic, teaches various ways to reach a conclusion, including vitanda, vada, and jalpa. Krishna says, I am vada, the natural conclusion. Listen to what vada. Vada is debate carried out fairly, according to standard rules, without trying to force the establishment of a particular conclusion. So it means dispassionately. Let's look what Shastra says. Let's look what Srila Prabhupada says. Let's look at what would be appropriate according to time, place, and circumstance. What do you think, Prabhu? Well, I have a different opinion. I think a little differently. Let's see if we can come to that collaborative, cooperative. Prabhupada was so insistent on this word cooperation. That kind of mood leads to vada, leads to the truth. And then one of our great acharyas, one of those two great acharyas continues, vitanda is quibbling or merely destructive argument in which one tries to defeat the opponent by any means possible, but does nothing substantial to positively prove one's own thesis. Jalpa, using various deceptive means to fool the opposition, is unfair argument. Vitanda and jalpa are forms of argument in which winning, not necessarily determining the truth, is the main consideration. Right? You know Prabhupada's story of the scissors, right? I'm sure 98% of you, but really quickly, two people fighting, what's better, knife or scissors? The knife guy throws the scissors person over the bridge into the water. He can't swim, but with his last breath, he puts his hand above the water and shows scissors. And so sometimes we're like that. And that means we're definitely affected by rajas or tamas, because sattva means dispassionate. We can even be very strong in our opinion about something, but still we're willing to hear the other devotees and hear their point of view. And to your point, Prabhu, yes, if we don't have that yet, then we have conversations with devotees who are more seasoned, more senior, and more dispassionate. Even when we're dealing with something in our own life, sometimes we're dealing with some problem. Isn't it sometimes super helpful to talk to a friend? They're a little more detached. They're seeing things a little bit more objectively, and they can look at things differently than us who are just in the middle of it, and totally, kind of absorbed in it. Is that all right, Prabhu? That answer your question? Okay. We could take one more, and then I think we should move on to one or two more. Yes, I see it. I think I saw Mataji in the back with her hand up. Is that right? I could put on my glasses and confirm that you're the right gender. Yes, I got it right. Yes, Mataji. Oh, okay.
I'll go.
Okay, you and then her.
Yeah. So you talked about the getting caught up in the detail, and let's say we are having an argument or something, or disagreement, and you're caught up in the detail. How do we come out of it in that moment? I mean, do you have some suggestion on that?
We try to be a little sattvic and detach. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with getting caught up in details. Let's say I actually once had this conflict. A temple got a nice sized donation, and the Sankirtan leader wanted to buy a new van for the Sankirtan devotees. And the head pujari wanted to make a beautiful, fantastic outfit for Janmashtami, more opulent than the normal outfit. So both of them, they were going at it, right? But all for Prabhupada's service and Krishna's service, book distribution, deity, they both had their quotes. The deity is, they had all the quotes about the deity, how important the deities are. They had their quotes about book distribution. They were having I don't know if you can relate to this in India, but they're having a snowball fight with Prabhupada quotes. Just throwing quotes at each other. My role was to say, okay, let's all calm down. Let's appreciate that you both want to serve the temple, both want to serve Prabhupada. And let's discuss coolly what we should do with this donation. Right? So there's nothing wrong with having different opinions about. Matter of fact, if we didn't have arguments sometimes in ISKCON and disagreements over details, I would think that's a big problem, because that would mean ISKCON's just like nobody cares, just like, whatever. And ISKCON's really going down. So the fact that people really care is good, but there's a good way to have a disagreement, there's a good way to have a debate, and there's a not very good way. So to answer your question though, it's nice if everyone could just take a step back, take a few breaths, maybe do some pranayama, whatever will help them think of Krishna, appreciate and try to appreciate the other devotee's point of view. What's that verse in the Bhagavad Gita? The yogi I'm just paraphrasing, by understanding himself sees other living entities. Anyone know that? I can't remember that. I think it's 6th chapter. So try to empathize with the other devotee and appreciate their point of view. Prabhupada wrote that to Balavanta Prabhu in 1972. He was talking about college preaching. So let's see if I look around the room. Panchagoda Prabhu, what do you think a average college student in 1972, what do you think their point of view is about life and what their interests are? Okay, I would say drugs, sex, rock and roll, and Mayavad philosophy.
Why you expose me?
So, and Prabhupada said you should appreciate their point of view. And he gave the example of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya listening to Lord Chaitanya, listening to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya for 7 days without saying something. And he said even Lord Krishna tolerated Arjuna's, Prabhupada, not my words, Prabhupada's words, nonsense in the 1st chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So he said, yes, they're a little puffed up. He said they deserve it, college students. But he said if you appreciate their point of view, if you listen to them, gradually they'll be attracted. So listening is very much a sattvic activity. I'm sure everyone would raise their hand that sometimes when other people are talking, you're thinking about what you're going to say next instead of listening to them. Right? So sattvic thing is nothing wrong to having strong opinions. That, like I said, that could be good. But I often say you should balance courage and consideration. Courage to make your point strongly, and consideration to hear the other person or the other way of looking at it, and find that balance. Is that all right? Last one, and then we'll go on. Yes, Mataji?
Thank you so much. How Krishna is dealing in front of the moment where he see a demon, it is a conflict. So, is he? How Krishna is dealing? Is he appreciate and try to give his point of view, or
is Krishna trying to give his point of view?
The moment where he become strict, what
it becomes
strict.
Strict
is said by example to Bakasura stop or Putana.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
What is the limit for Krishna to tolerate and appreciate?
What is the limit for Krishna to tolerate? How many did he tolerate with Shishupal? 100. Yeah, 99, 100. Yes, he tolerated 100 with him. It really, you have to ask him. Last thing I'm going to do is speak for Krishna. I can give a few examples, perhaps, but yeah. I'll just read a few more quotes before we go on to the other topic. The moment we want to believe something, this is from George Bernard Shaw, but it's very wise. The moment we want to believe something, we suddenly see all the arguments for it and become blind to the arguments against it. Sometimes. And Prabhupada writes that in a drugstore, there are many medicines, and all of them may be genuine, but what is required is that an expert physician prescribe medicine for a particular patient. We cannot say in this case, this is also medicine, this is also medicine. No, the medicine which is effective for a particular person is medicine for him. Pralena parachiyate. Okay, so let's go on to the second part of this purport, where Srila Prabhupada, well, it's not the disciples of Srila Prabhupada are talking. Actually, Prabhupada also in the Krishna book, he in this purport, they're saying the disciples are saying that Srila Prabhupada further points out that the word anumodate here indicates that one who, quote, supports a preacher of the Krishna conscious movement will also receive the benefits mentioned here. And before that, the purport says that in any case, one who recites or hears accounts of these pastimes will certainly be engaged in Krishna consciousness and traverse the path of liberation and taste the nectar of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So what they're paraphrasing Prabhupada actually writes, anyone who attentively hears the narrations of the Lord's pastimes in Dwarka or supports a preacher of the Krishna consciousness movement, like you all, will certainly find it very easy to traverse the path of liberation and taste the nectar of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. And thus he will be engaged in Lord Krishna's devotional service. So, yes, there's so many people sit here and talk about hearing about Krishna, right? So we won't repeat everything that they've said and emphasize that. We should hear about Krishna. Bas. But let's talk about this other thing that's interesting and a little unique. And that is, or supports a preacher of the Krishna conscious movement. Or we could say, who serves the mission in one way or another. Or we could say, who serves a devotee. Mahat sevam dvara mahur vimuktes. Right? Let's talk about that. And of course, Krishna and Srila Prabhupada goes great lengths to talk about this point in chapter 12, verse 10 of the Bhagavad Gita. Right? And Krishna says, if you cannot practice the regulations of Bhakti Yoga, then just try to work for me. Because by working for me, you will come to the perfect stage. Now listen, this is a really important purport. Listen to what Prabhupada is saying here. One who is not able even to practice the regulated principles of Bhakti Yoga. That doesn't necessarily mean the 4 regs. It could be more like the 64 items of Bhakti in Nectar in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. But Either way, under the guidance of a spiritual master, can still be drawn to the perfectional stage by working for the Supreme Lord. How to do this work has already been explained in the 55th verse of the 11th chapter. One should be, listen to this. Okay, so you can't be, a sadhaka and mangalarti and all that. One should be sympathetic to the propagation of Krishna consciousness. There are many devotees who are engaged in the propagation of Krishna consciousness. Again, all of you. And they require help. Raise your hand if you don't need any help. Oh, he raised his hand. So even if one cannot directly practice the regulated principles of bhakti, he can try to help such work. This is important as a preacher, right? For us to, so, sometimes we, okay, well, we'll get a donation from them, but, what else? They're actually, they're being spoken of quite highly here, people who serve the mission in one way or another. So even, I read that. Every endeavor requires, anyone remember the 4 things that every endeavor requires? Prabhupada mentions this quite often. I think it's in Sanskrit also. Money. Yes. Yes, capital, the word Prabhupada uses, yes. Land, organization, or intelligence, he sometimes says, and labor. Just as in business, one requires a place to stay, some capital to use, some labor, and some organization to expand. So the same is required in the service of Krishna. The only difference is that in materialism, one works for sense gratification. The same work, however, can be performed for the satisfaction of Krishna. And that is spiritual activity. If one has sufficient money, he can help in building an office or the KBCC. Whoop, didn't say it. I got lost there. Or the temple for propagating Krishna consciousness. Or he can help with publications. There are various fields of activities, and one should be interested in such activities. If one cannot sacrifice the results of his activities, the same person can still sacrifice some percentage to propagate Krishna consciousness. This voluntary service to the cause of Krishna consciousness will help one to rise to the higher stage of love for God, whereupon one becomes perfect. So, as people who are sharing Krishna consciousness with others, yes, naturally we would love someone to go all the way to pure devotional service, full-time, back home, back to God in this life. That would be great. But we also know that there's gradations. And so we try to, engage people to the furthest extent that they can go to love Krishna. The example that comes up with me all the time when I think about this is Jayananda Prabhu. And there's a whole book written about Jayananda Prabhu. You'll see his picture, hopefully, in every Rath Yatra on the Rath cart, as Prabhupada requested. And one thing, he was famous for a lot of things, but one thing he was famous for is just, building a Rath cart, just calls some hippies or some people here and just, hey, can you help out for me? Can you hand me that wrench? He knew that if they even handed the wrench, they started their devotional service. Agyata Sukriti. Right? And he was so expert at this. He was so, the word that comes to my mind when I hear about Jayananda Prabhu is sincerity. He so sincerely wanted to give everyone a chance to serve Krishna, even in the slightest way or in a big way. And he touched so many, the hearts of people that he, it's just incredible. Some of the stories, I wish I had time to tell them now, but it's quite incredible. And so he had this faith in the potency of bhakti. That bhakti, this was our, Panchagauda Prabhu and I did these things for many years in America of sometimes not always distributing books, but getting donations from people in different ways. But still, for me, the meditation was, this person did as long as I make sure I give every paisa of their money to Krishna, They started some devotional service, and it was a really wonderful meditation, wasn't it? You know, just thinking like that. And so what speak if we're here in India, we're distributing books directly, and that person may have mayavad and all kinds of misunderstandings, but they give a donation, they get a book, and they get the opportunity to really learn what is what. It's so glorious. It's so glorious. And Krishna is talking about it in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It's mentioned in the 69th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this can be a meditation for us. That the different, it's just like in the it's just like in these verses 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 of the 12th chapter. You know, Krishna says, well, yeah, you should just remember Krishna always. If you can't do that, then practice sadhana. If you can't do that, do this. If you can't even do that, do this. So as people who are sharing Krishna consciousness with others, something is better than nothing. Right? So even giving people a chance, Prabhupada, so we took things so Srila Prabhupada said if they even touch a book, they're benefited. So I remember, try to give somebody a book when we were doing book distribution, and they wouldn't even touch it. I'd tap them on the head as they were leaving. Have a nice day. They touched the book. Right. So, yena kena pakarina manasa Krishna divesha. Somehow or other, give them an opportunity to start. And of course, we don't want to just plant the seed. We want it to grow into a wonderful creeper. And that's what a place like Krishna Balarama Mandir does. It gives people a chance to go much further and further and further in their Krishna consciousness. And for us, we're not so off the hook. We can't just say, a little's better. No, we should really take full advantage of the gifts Prabhupada's given us. Full advantage of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Full advantage of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Full advantage of giving us the most beautiful deities in the world. Full advantage of sadhu sangha. Because for us, we should really do our best to make this our last life in the material world. Do you want to come back and imagine, what social media is like now. Imagine what it's going to be like in your next life or the next life or the next life. It's going to be a total mess. Right? And always understanding that we do our best and Krishna does the rest. It's really up to Krishna. So, yes, Panchagoda. I was just about to ask for questions and you read my mind.
Brajavardhan traveling Sankirtan came to Miami. That's where we met originally. Early 80s?
Early 80s?
Late 80s.
Late 80s.
So, Kali Yuga, many societies have shortcomings. Different churches, different organizations, and different leaderships. And they have certain advantageous things to do, like hearing, chanting, and serving nicely. But there are also many people who observe these shortcomings, like maybe child protection or treating the women improperly, or maybe, Ritvik, or this issue or that issue. There's always something wrong in Kali Yuga, and there's so many leaders that are expected to make things right, and people campaign. So how much of our energy should we put towards hearing out some of these very valid arguments, but at the same time and being distracted from our day-to-day sadhana and, like faith and ability to be surrendered to Prabhupada and Prabhupada's authority?
It's a real trick. It's a great question, and it's a tricky one. I think we have to find the balance. If you could get so absorbed in one of the shortcomings and really work to improve it, and that's great, as long as we remember that we're doing it as a service, and that our very essence of our being is service to Krishna. Jivera Swarupahaya Krishnara Nityadas. So, and we do that. There's Chesta-rupa and Bhava-rupa. Chesta-rupa is the external activities that we do as devotees, and Bhava-rupa is the devotional mood. So even when we're hearing about the challenges that happen in our society, and even as we're protesting about the society, about that, we do that with devotion. And we remember that there's also a time for hearing and chanting about Krishna. And when we do that, then when we hear and chant about Krishna and take time to practice 5 most potent items of bhakti, then we get a much clearer perspective on the challenges that we're facing in Kali Yuga and the shortcomings of any society, including ours. And I think we can work in a much more effective way to ameliorate, improve those situations. It's their realities, but there's also the ultimate reality of the spiritual world, and so we should deal responsibly with them. We should take whatever precautions are there, learn from our mistakes, protect children properly, protect and deal and honor our women devotees properly, and all the other things that, and chant and hear about Krishna. Right? Because that's, I find for myself, like in dealing with conflicts, I find for myself when I've taken the time to center myself, that's a word that they use these days, in Krishna, hearing and chanting and understanding, trying to see Krishna's hand in things and all that, then I can, in a much more, just like the question before, these issues are dealt with much more when we have a sattvic mindset, a cool mindset, and really, okay, what can we practically do? How can we make sure that this happens? How can we make sure that we don't, say we dealt with it and then 2 months later we're, on to something else? How can we, those are usually much better done when we're cool-headed and really thinking clearly. Is that all right? Yeah, you're cool.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, for the wonderful class. My statement is regarding the first part of our discussion.
Achha.
Sometimes we think that we are serving Krishna in our best way, but we tend to forget that Krishna doesn't mean Krishna alone. Krishna means Krishna doesn't mean Krishna alone.
Oh yeah.
Krishna means all his paraphernalia and anything and everything related to Krishna.
Okay.
That's why there is agreement, disagreement, and quarrel among us.
So yeah, there's tadiya, and so you're right, Krishna's not alone, and we're not only serving Krishna, we're serving especially Krishna's devotees. And I think the secret, should I tell you a secret? The secret of success, well, actually I should first be careful. Prabhupada says the secret of success is to be serious and sincere. Those are 2 words. But we know the secret of success is to serve devotees. What's the verse in the 2nd chapter, 1st canto, about how serving devotees? Come on, you all know that verse, right? Is it? I forgot it. That's why I'm asking you all. Sushusho shadadanasya vasudeva kataruchi sanmahat sevaya vipra. That when you serve devotees, you get a taste for hearing. Right? So, Prabhupada gave the example that, in Juhu, right? The Juhu beach says well-to-do people. So he said, there's that well-to-do man with this young child. He said, what could you offer this guy, he didn't say guy, this gentleman, right? He probably has a huge bungalow and 2 big cars, But if you give his son a 1 rupee sweet, he'll be so happy. So if we want to please Krishna, we know the best way is to please those that Krishna loves, his devotees. And it's not, and the point is also made, especially by Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it's not only the great devotees. It's not only the great devotees. Because we don't know. Dharma, you are really intelligent. You really are. So can you point out the top 5 most advanced devotees in the room right now? Just the top 5. Just Which one? That's kind of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's point, that there's the 26 qualities of the Vaishnavas, but only one of them is the Swarup Lakshanam, the other 25 are Tatastha Lakshanam, marginal, and one is the essence. And that is, I forget the Krishna Samarpanam, anyone know the exact Sanskrit? But having taken shelter of Krishna. And it's very hard to really know who's fully surrendered to Krishna. Therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, don't offend anybody. Be careful. Right? Why take a chance? Because, that simple, humble devotee may be the most exalted one in Krishna's eyes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, right next to you. And I think, it's time's up. Should I take one more? Yeah? Okay. Right.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So, regarding the point that you made that apparently Arjuna's disposition, in the beginning you mentioned that...
I quoted Prabhupada's. Yeah.
So one of the contradictions that comes to my mind that Srila Prabhupada mentions, I think it's gone, we accept that Prabhupada said, going back home, back to Godhead. So far I have heard is that in the spiritual world also, Srila Prabhupada mentions that Jiva has a bit of independence. So even then, Jiva can fall from the spiritual world.
We're going to talk about the origin of the Jiva at 9:03.
Like fall down.
Forget about it.
Yeah. So even Jiva...
But Krishna does also say, having returned there, they never come back again. That's what I've never heard Prabhupada say, that again we can misuse our I don't recall ever seeing that. I've seen him say, you go back and you learned your lesson. But so I won't comment further than that. There's probably something in the Sandarbhas or something, but I don't. I'll just quote Prabhupada and Krishna. Right? Is the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita? Right? Anyone know that verse? That having once gone, one never returns. Does anyone know? Where are all of our shloka slingers when you need them? Yeah. That's the verse.
We don't want to show off.
But just as a little ending about how things can be contradicted, I'll just as a little spice. This is about 30 seconds, but just about common phrases that contradict each other. Right? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Better safe than sorry. The pen is mightier than the sword. Actions speak louder than words. Look before you leap. He who hesitates is lost. Birds of a feather flock together. Opposites attract. Last one. The best things in life are free. You get what you pay for. So there's different ways of looking at things in this world, but if we calmly, in a mood of vada, sit down with other Vaishnavas, discuss things, we can work things out. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.